participants and listeners from around the world. I'm Kristin Schwartz, licensed midwife and MC for Gold Learning. And here at Gold, we're getting ready for the Gold Perinatal Online Conference of 2019. And today with me, I have a special treat, is the speaker of the closing keynote for the conference, Adriana Lozada. Welcome, Adriana.
Thank you, Kristen. So happy to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you here. And we are going to dive into your topic and into the conference in just a moment. But, first of all, for some of our listeners who don't know you yet, let us know a little bit about you. Where are you located and what is your background?
Yeah, so I'm currently located in Rochester, New York, right by the lake up near Canada in New York State. And I've been here for about 15 years now, but I'm originally from Venezuela. So I was born and mostly raised there, spent some time in in the US when I was in middle school, and then I did my undergraduate in Canada, and I did a gap year in Japan and spent a summer in Germany. So that's why I always say my background is multicultural because I've had the privilege for sure and the honor of living and experiencing many different cultures and places during my life.
That is absolutely wonderful. And you fit right in here. This is an international conference. We have listeners from all over the world. And I just find it so fascinating to learn from each other, to learn here in this international environment from speakers from various backgrounds. So I'm so glad you're here with us and presenting at this conference with us, Adriana. Adriana. I am sorry, I wanted to pronounce your name correctly. So it's Adriana.
Yes, no worries. Thank you. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your background. You are, you are diving into all things postpartum and labor land, as you call it here in your presentation. Um, but before we go into the actual presentation, tell us, how did you get where you are? You are also hosting a fantastic podcast as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So my background, I like most people who join the birth world, there tends to be a big aha and transformation moment when we have our kids, right? That was true for me. And I sort of make my life before and after the birth of my daughter, who is now 14. And before that, especially during my time in Venezuela, I was a print and online editor, and I did a lot of media related work and had a radio show and did yeah, a lot of internet content related for youth. So it was youth related content. Um and had to wear many, many different hats. At that point, I knew nothing about birth, didn't have a clue, had never thought much about it or wanted to learn. I was just, very type A, focus on my career. Um, and then fast forward to when I was pregnant and had my daughter, I kind of approached my pregnancy just with that sort of journalistic focus and dove deep into all the information that I could get my hands into. And the more I read, the more kind of appalled I became at how the birthing person is the one that should be upheld and doing all the work. And in so many ways I was finding that they were just being considered as a vessel for delivering a baby, right? That's kind of what it felt.
Right.
So I did create a birth plan, had midwives. I didn't know about doulas that much, so I didn't have a doula. And that's my husband and I, we both say that's like our biggest regret. He says, yeah, we were just stupid. That we,
You did the best with
yeah,
the information you had available at that time, you know?
we
Yes.
know what we know when we know it, right?
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So it was one of those things that on paper I did get my birth plan. I had an unmedicated vaginal birth with midwives in a hospital, which was what was my intention, but it was still a really difficult and miserable experience. It was a very much of a wake up call for me, and that's what prompted me to become a doula. I've been a doula for 11 years now. And uh, then fast forward 5 years ago, or 4.5 years ago, I started the Birthful podcast and have the great, unique honor of talking on a weekly basis with different birth professionals and now also new and expectant parents that give me their birth stories and postpartum stories. But at the beginning, it was all topical episodes. And I started talking to all these different professionals and connecting the dots and seeing more and more how I could apply this during my prenatals and my interactions with doula clients. Because for me, and we'll get into this is, I get deeper into this in the talk, but it was that question of how do we get the birthing person to own their birth? We're all sitting around and trying to come up with ways to improve the system, but what about them? how
Right.
can how can we change their focus? So that was kind of where all this started, in terms of the talks and this new model that I created, and then being able to create prenatals differently with my doula clients and see them show up differently, and that has become really exciting. um, so yeah, that's kind of my journey into the whole birth world.
I just absolutely love listening to you because I see the evolution, so to speak, of Adriana here. You know, how you took your background, you had your own radio show and took that, married that to the passion of everything birth related, created this podcast, then sitting down with all these experts and then turning this, going one step further and turning this around, and how all that knowledge that you have, not only to educate others with your podcast, but turning this around as in your doula career as well. What can I do with all this, and how can we use this as something that the birthing person can, turn this and own their birth, right? So I just absolutely love listening to you for that.
I am very passionate about it, for sure.
I can hear that. I can absolutely hear that. And so I want to dive a little bit into your presentation. And I'm so glad that you are the closing keynote here for the Perinatal Online Conference. Usually when we come to the end, it always makes me a little bit sad because I don't want the conference to end because it's like my passion as well. But your topic, and I see this, is like the perfect finish for this conference. I just absolutely love your title, Destination Labor Land, Setting a Fresh Course Towards Physiological Birth. It's like it gives us hope. It sets, I can basically see us set our sails and embark after the conference on this new journey with everything we have learned. And it sounds like the journey of hope and empowerment there. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I love that you said that you could setting our sails, because funny story that I did mention before, I lived on a sailboat with my husband for a
Oh,
year. So
wow.
that kind of adventurous life and doing things differently is very dear to our hearts. But I feel that's kind of what you also need to do when you are giving birth, right? You're stepping into this whole new transformation and into something that's completely unknown to you. Um, and so, in terms of my talk, that's really important because you have the birthing person who hasn't done this before, but we need, for birth to flow, we need them to lead the rest of the birth team around them. At least that's how I view it. And I think it works best when we do, because it's not just the fact of having a baby, it's also how you're birthing a baby, but you're birthing your new identity as a parent. And I think that birth really colors the way you parent and you go forward. So it is, we know for many reasons, a key part of our lives. And so that was my focus of how can we, frankly, my focus was, as a doula, I had seen a lot of what I call sucky vaginal births,
Hmm.
which is,
Yeah.
yeah, the birth plan happened, but oh my gosh,
Right.
this was so tough getting here.
Right.
Um, and and not loving the pushing stage, like being disappointed every time we got to the pushing stage because it felt you're a midwife, so
Yeah.
you have, yeah, this idea of the directed pushing, and oh great, here we go, we're going to be here for hours. This is just, I kept saying, this is not how it's intended. I don't think we're intended to, people are intended to give birth exhausted.
Right.
um
I agree.
right, and so then how can we change that? Well, by supporting physiology. And
Mm.
but how can we get, so supporting physiology, it requires you to go to labor land. Labor land is a deep emotional, mental, and physical state of letting go and having all your focus be internal, right? So,
Yes. Yes.
right. And it's in that need to go internal. How can we help the person go internal? And what are we doing that are obstacles for that? What interventions are we bringing that
Mm.
are obstacles for that? And this is part of how I created this structure. That's one piece of it. And then the other part, the other pillar to it is I took another step further back and go, okay, let's go prenatally. How do you learn about birth? And realize that the way we describe the birth process is all in medical language. But if this is a physiological event and the person giving birth is not a medical professional, this is not something that they should be latching onto.
Right.
The body, as a physiologist, does not care one bit about centimeters, station, dilation, how many days you've been on it. None of that. But we know physiology. We do it all the time. We blink, we breathe, we digest.
Right.
And we don't go, wait, I ate 3 hours ago. Let me check. Where's the food at right now? We need to know. Who cares? One way or another, you'll poop. Hopefully. And so you won't be pregnant forever either.
Right.
And
Right.
there, this is not to bash medicine. I think there's a great and beautiful place for medicine in there. It's just the overuse and the
Yeah.
over reliance on the birthing person of it. And it's by having that need to shift the focus from the external to the internal. So I created a separation of purviews where, you know, all the medical people do their medical things, and that is their job. And then as a doula, I have the luxury of not doing anything medical. So I
Right.
can be on the side with the birthing person and say, okay, this is what we do. And usually the only tool that that person is given that I find is, you know, learn about these stages, learn about the
Right.
dilation, learn about how to time contractions, but just trust your body. Don't worry about that. Surrender. Trust your intuition. Usually in Western cultures, we're really bad at trusting our bodies, trusting
Right.
our intuition. What is even intuition, right? And then who wants to surrender?
I know, right? It's surrendering also sounds like losing control, right? I mean, if you tell somebody to surrender, that sounds like, no, I don't want to do that. That I don't want to give up control. What is this? This is scary, you know?
So scary. And what we want to do is control more and more things during
Yes.
our lives. We have so much control. I think we have every day more choices, so we have more options to control everything around us, even though that can be a false sense of control sometimes. But
Right.
um, so how do you get the birthing person who lives within this culture and speaks of birth in this way and has all this, already is in this bubble of how to understand birth, and get them to a point, and within a culture that values
Right.
um, the skills that we value, right? Our organization, efficiency, timeliness, structure, measurements,
Right.
the skills that we usually don't value, uncertainty, messiness, process instead of goal. Those are the skills you really need to tap into. So, surrender. Those are the tools you need to tap into. So
Absolutely.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah, my whole talk is about, and my whole process was discovering a structure where I sit down with my clients prenatally, and in our meetings, I give them tools. I give them homework that is a way of them using their, our traditionally logical valued skills to learn the softer skills that are needed during birth to support that physiology. And then they have specifics of, okay, what are the aspects that I have to support physiology?
Right.
And they have kind of like a mental to-do list. So if there's a disappointing vaginal check, they are not thrown into a thinking frenzy and taken out of labor land and gone to external
Right.
for a number that means nothing. They go, yeah, that's right. That doesn't matter.
Right.
Let me
Oh,
go internal by doing this.
that sounds
Um,
wonderful.
yeah, that's kind of that's the that wasn't very short, but that's the gist
No,
of
that's
it.
absolutely amazing. And I could talk for hours with you here. I mean, you said so many amazing and so true things. Like you're absolutely right. This medical terminology is absolutely not helpful. And the body is often treated, especially by the healthcare providers, often as a shell, performing all these functions, these centimeters, and if we go from 1 centimeter to 5 centimeter to 10, and then we have to go to 10 centimeters, and then the baby comes out. So it's like this shell that performs functions. But when we in your model there of care focus on the physiological aspects of the body, all that other stuff is really, and go inwards instead of outward and external. It makes so much sense, absolutely when it comes to birth. And another great thing that you mentioned that I absolutely love is in the beginning you mentioned the birthing person leads the birth team. And I'm sure when you talk to some of your clients, they go like, I can do that? What? Because in our culture, we're so used to the doctors are telling us what to do, the nurses are telling us what to do, right? And so when you come with your model, and I can probably see some of your clients going like, I'm leading this? Really? How? What? I can do that? Is that real? Have you had that reaction?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's great to see them kind of open up to possibilities.
Uh-huh.
And then, but I don't just leave them with that, right? And because that brings anxiety and fear and things that are not going to support physiology and the flow of oxytocin. So it's like, yes, but this is how your
Right.
job is to get out of your body's way. But this is these are the steps for you to do that. And then it becomes such a relief to them. Like I'll say things like, your goal is not to get to 10. Your goal is to have a baby.
Right.
So it doesn't matter. That's an external milestone that's been created. Who cares when you get to 10?
Hmm.
You continue doing your stuff. You don't have to like do something different when you push. You just do your own thing. And it is for them a relief. You can see the stress just melt off of them when they're like, oh, okay, I see what this is about. I see that it's going to be my uterus and baby dancing as I just, flow with them. Um, yeah, and it's I love this because now it's gone from sucky vaginal birth
Right.
to, I can't wait for the pushing stage.
Hmm.
I can't wait to see them discover their own process. I can't wait to, them confirming. And even the people that listen to the podcast and listen to, that dearly listen to me drown on an hour a week, um, I've got some mantras, and one of them is, wait until you can't but push. And I've had people write in and say, the whole time I had your voice in my head going like, can't but push, wait until you can't but push. And, that's such an honor that little things like that, they were open to curiosity,
Right.
took what resonated, and then have these very powerful births. And I want to say
Hmm.
powerful births regardless of how they get there. It doesn't mean that the only way to have a good birth experience is non-medicated vaginal.
Right.
Some people, and I want to stress that I don't
Yes.
care how
Yeah.
they give birth, but I want them to show up differently,
Right.
and then they can navigate the challenges.
Absolutely wonderful. You're giving them wonderful tools. You giving them the sense of, yes, I own this, I feel ready for this, and I'm looking forward to this, to this birth. It's just absolutely fantastic how you do this.
Thank you. Thank you. And the last thing I want to say is one of the points that was really important for me in this model is that it wasn't antagonistic. I see so much talk out there of us versus them
Right,
kind of thing,
right.
of the birthing people and the medical, and it's not. It should be collaborative care. So this also works on lessening hierarchy, but by creating different purviews. So it's something that in the birthing person's mind, they can get, like you were saying, oh, and I can do that.
Hmm.
Yeah, not only can you do that, this is how it should, you should do this. And then they can focus on that.
Right,
And together, I find that births flow much better. But then if there is a medical situation, it is very clear
right.
that that is what's needed
Absolutely.
because I haven't, I'm gonna knock on wood so I don't jinx myself, but it's been quite a while since I've seen a failure to progress. Like,
Right.
something that a birth that is that the reason for not happening is failure to progress. Usually if it's not progressing, it's very clear why, and it
Right.
tends to be a clear medical reason. So that brings a lot of peace to the person as well, to the birthing person.
Absolutely. And then the birth can also continue in collaboration, as you mentioned, with the team at the hospital. So it becomes a really well-rounded team approach. And we don't have the situation us versus them as well.
Exactly.
Well, Adriana, it was absolutely wonderful talking with you. And I wish I could spend an hour here with you or several hours for that matter. And I can't wait for your presentation here with us at Gold. So thank you so much for showing up here today and chatting with me.
My pleasure. It was really great. Hopefully, we'll talk more some other time.
Oh, absolutely, we will. And for our listeners now, the presentation Destination Laborland Setting a Fresh Course Towards Physiological Birth is the closing keynote to the Gold Perinatal Online Conference of 2019. It's a fantastic conference. Check it out. We have over 14 hours of education, anything, everything, and anything to do with the topic of the perinatal and the birth world and Laborland here with Adriana as our closing keynote speaker. This presentation will be live twice on October 28th. And so, to our listeners, go to goldperinatal.com and check it out. We have all the information there, and you can see when the presentations are in your time zone. And we hope to see you there. Bye bye, everyone.